Welcome, everybody. You may or may not have heard this because you've probably grown tired of yet another challenge to the Affordable Care Act. But Obamacare, which is the same thing as the ACA, remember, Obamacare has survived another challenge, and this one in the Supreme Court via a 7-2 decision, which we're going to look at in a moment. You know, at this point, it's time to stop even thinking about Obamacare as this additional thing on our healthcare system. You know, it's been 11 years. The fundamentals of Obamacare are just now part of the not that great healthcare system that we have in the United States. And increasingly, I mean, at this point, dozens and dozens of House votes when Republicans controlled the House to try to undo it. Various different legal and constitutional challenges, Donald Trump and 4 years of trying to gut it, despite the fact that he had nothing sensible or reasonable to replace it with. We just now have our healthcare system, and it includes some Obamacare provisions, and we now need to move forward from where we are. But there are many who don't want to accept that, and there are many who want to continue pretending that there is still this appendage that is Obamacare, which could just be clipped off very, very easily. It's just part of our system at this point in time. Let's look at some of the reporting on this from CNBC. The Supreme Court ruled on Thursday against Texas and other Republican-led states seeking to strike down Obamacare in the law's latest test before the nation's highest court. The top court voted 7-2 to reverse an appeals court ruling that had struck down the law's individual mandate provision. That is the provision that Donald Trump very aggressively tried to attack, because if you get rid of that, you are really doing significant damage to the way Obamacare works. Justice Stephen Breyer, who authored the opinion of the court, said that Texas and the other states that challenged the law failed to show that they were harmed by it. In legal terms, the states failed to demonstrate that they had standing. Neither the individual nor the state plaintiffs have shown that the injury they will suffer or have suffered is fairly traceable to the allegedly unlawful conduct of which they complain. The decision is a major victory for the legislation, which former President Barack Obama signed in 2010. It's a crucial element of the nation's healthcare system. Joe Biden has vowed to expand its reach. The decision marks the third time that Obamacare has survived a challenge before the Supreme Court. Defenders of the law worried that the panel, which is now a 6-3 Republican-appointed majority, would scrap the legislation, which has long been criticized by conservatives. Chuck Schumer said each time in each arena, the Affordable Care Act has prevailed. Going on to say, let me say definitively, the Affordable Care Act has won. The Supreme Court has ruled. The ACA is here to stay, and now we're going to try to make it bigger and better. What a day. What is most frustrating to me about this is that Obamacare did good things, but it's really no incredible victory. It's not God's gift since sliced bread or whatever other metaphors and analogies you want me to embarrassingly mix together. We really, I've said before, Medicare for all is not the only way. And I've spoken recently to other people on the left who have a similar perspective. If you look at what Germany has done with a multi-payer system, if you set up a system where the health insurance companies exist, but they must be nonprofits and have to compete with a government plan, if you want to do a combination system like France has, or in Amsterdam, in the Netherlands, in Holland, taxes are higher than in the United States, and people pay a small fee for a comprehensive healthcare system. At least my friend who works in Amsterdam does. But overall, it's way cheaper than in the United States, and you have access and quality is quite good. There are other ways that we can get everybody coverage that is good. So this is not about it has to be Medicare for all, which I would be very much open to. This is about the fact that 11 years later, we're still arguing about something that is, number one, not a miraculously great thing, although it does good things. And number two, is not radical. The fact that in other countries, there are so many phases beyond where we are, and we're at half the country, or at least half the elected officials, want to get rid of Obamacare. The other half want to keep it. Joe Biden wants a public option, but there's real questions about whether there's any practical way that it's actually going to be made a reality anytime soon, which would be a great failing for Joe Biden, to be absolutely and completely clear. It's humiliating that this is even the conversation that's happening in the United States when you look at every other country that's at our level of wealth and our level of development. And so, when you ask me, what is the most disgusting thing about this? Is it disgusting that Republicans, when they had the House, had like 60 something votes to try to repeal Obamacare, even though it was going to go nowhere? Yes, that's disgusting. Is it disgusting that Republicans continue to try to work within the legal system at different state level courts all the way up to the Supreme Court, and that Trump made it such a priority during his presidency to get rid of Obamacare, even though he had nothing sensible to replace it with? All of that stuff is disgusting. There's no question about it whatsoever. But the really crazy part to me is that this is so milquetoast. This is so, listen, it's good. Healthcare.gov, it's good that it was created. Keeping people to age 20 up to 26 on parent insurance, that's good. Pre-existing conditions, it's good. It's not that those things aren't good. It's crazy that those things even needed to be done in 2010. But the fact that 11 years have gone by, and other than some really small tweaks, mostly because of coronavirus, we are not anywhere beyond Obamacare, and there are still efforts being made to get rid of it. That's actually the disgusting part, that it's something so milquetoast and unremarkable. So Obamacare survived again in the Supreme Court. Great. Now maybe we can find something else to actually get done over this 11-year period during which it's been basically just fending off attacks on Obamacare from Republicans. I don't know. We'll follow and see what happens. There are 21 Republicans who voted against awarding medals to the police officers in Washington, D.C. Speaking of fighting off attacks, the police officers in Washington, D.C., who quite literally fought off attacks from Trump rioters on January 6th. The House overwhelmingly passed legislation to award the Congressional Gold Medal to the police officers who defended the U.S. Capitol during the January 6th riots. Lawmakers approved the award by a vote of 406 to 21. But wait a second, sir, 21 no votes, where did those come from? The 21 no votes were, of course, all Republicans and all supporters of Donald Trump. Some have tried, as Newsweek writes, to downplay what happened on January 6th. Others have been previously linked to QAnon conspiracy theories. Congressman Thomas Massie of Kentucky says that this could have an effect on the hundreds of suspects who have been charged in connection with the events of January 6th. Massey saying, I think if we call that an insurrection, it could have a bearing on their case that I don't think would be good. If they just wanted to give the police recognition, they could have done it without trying to make it partisan, making the case that if you just wanted to give medals but not refer to what happened as an insurrection, maybe Massey would have gone for it. But when you call it an insurrection, you're politicizing. Radical Republican Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene of Georgia said she voted against it because it referred to the Capitol as a, quote, temple. She also said I wouldn't call it an insurrection. Congressman Scott Perry of Pennsylvania said it's all politics, it's all garbage. So here's the list of the 21 that voted against it. Many of these will not surprise you. Andy Biggs, Lauren Boebert is, of course, on the list. Michael Cloud, Andrew Clyde, Warren Davidson, Matt Gaetz and Louis Gohmert. No surprise to see them on the list. Bob Good. Paul Gosar is a disgusting radical. Of course, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Andy Harris. Jody Heiss is on the list. He is absolutely vile and disgusting. We've talked about him recently. Thomas Massey, who I just quoted. Mary Miller, Barry Moore, Ralph Norman, Scott Perry, John Rose, Matt Rosendale, Chip Roy, and Greg Steube of Florida. A number of lawmakers expressed outrage at representatives who voted against it. Adam Kinzinger tweeted, "How can you vote no to this is beyond me." Then again, denying an insurrection is as well. To the brave Capitol and D.C. Metro PD, thank you to the 21 who voted against this. They will continue to defend your right to vote no anyway. You know, for me, what is I hate when we look at a political issue or an issue that could be a political issue and then realize it's just posturing for optics. I hate that because I find it to be a form of grifting. It's claiming to care about something when you really don't. It's a version of playing a character publicly that is not really who you are. They back the blue. They support the police, the thin blue line, all of this different stuff. And then all of a sudden, hey, let's award these officers for what they did. It's the same very police that you claim defending against any reduction in funding is your patriotic duty. Let's award them. Oh, no. Why? Well, the word insurrection was in the bill. The word temple was in the bill. And this goes back to what is fundamentally Republican support of institutions that they deem worthy to their political worldview without really giving a you-know-what about the individuals. And I go back again to this example of the Iraq War. When George W. Bush was president, it was all about support the troops, support the troops, support the troops. And when people on the left like me said, hey, you know what? If we send troops into harm's way because of a lie about who actually attacked us on 9/11 and we send them to Iraq, that's not supporting the troops. That's blindly supporting a neoconservative Republican president who wants to finish what he sees as the job his father, George H.W. Bush, left undone in the early 90s. That's not supporting the troops. I was called unpatriotic. So it's not about support the troops as individuals, get them health care when they come back and make sure we treat PTSD seriously as opposed to some kind of character flaw. It's about support the troops means hope that they go and kill a bunch of people and turn a blind eye to what a Republican president wants. That's what they mean. And it's very similar with what's going on with support the police. Here's some police you can support. Well, no, we mean just funding departments so they can get tanks and shoulder mounted RPGs. These are individuals. We don't really care about them. That is at its core what this is really about. Let me know your thoughts. You can find me on Twitter at dpacman. The David Pakman Show is made possible by viewers like you who sign up for membership at joinpakman.com. Consider yourself invited to grab a membership on my website. Let's hear from some people in the audience. Why don't we? We've done well with it the last few weeks. We take calls via Discord at davidpakman.com/Discord. Let's start today with Connor from Atlanta, Georgia. Connor, you're on the air.
Hey, David.
Yes.
Hey, been watching your show now for about a year. Funny enough, first time I actually saw you was on Jesse Lee Peterson's show.
Okay.
And I've been kind of doing some soul searching. I'm 19. I voted for the first time back in November.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been doing some soul searching in regards to politics. Because I would usually say that I was an independent, a centrist, whatever you would want to label someone who doesn't really associate themselves with a political party, or say I've never called myself a liberal. I've never called myself a conservative. I think because I guess if I could maybe give you an example, like I'm not really big into like the online left politics, like with the cancel culture and things like that. And I'm not when it comes to like I guess Republicans or conservatives, I'm not really I don't really believe in like the so-called embracing tradition, quote unquote.
So Connor, what's an example of like a cancellation that happened that you disagree with?
I guess I wasn't a big fan of when Gina Carano got fired from The Mandalorian for her comments, because I think that there were people who probably did much worse things that still have careers, like say James Gunn when he 10 years about a decade ago when he made all those nasty tweets and he was fired, then he got rehired, and I just that's one thing I say I disagree with. I'm not a fan of Trump at all.
Okay. Connor, did you have a question today? Just because we've got a bunch of people who want to get on. I think I have a sense now of your politics, but did you have a question?
Sure. Okay. I do have a question. Okay, about Palestine and Israel. why do you? I don't know if you think this, but at least I got this impression from someone I know, someone who watches your show. He mentioned how you maybe believe that it should be under control of two belief systems or ideologies rather than one.
What should be under the control?
The Palestine and Israel issue going on.
I believe in a two-state solution. That maybe that's what your friend meant.
Yes. That's what I meant. Yeah. Why do you believe that as opposed to a one-state solution?
I think there is absolutely no chance that a one-state solution has even the possibility of bringing anybody even to the table. As difficult as some people say it would be to negotiate a two-state solution that would be acceptable to both sides, there will never even be a negotiation about a one-state solution. So I see it merely as something that it's guaranteed to get us nowhere, as opposed to maybe gets us nowhere.
Okay, I see.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I appreciate it, David. Thank you.
All right, Connor, thank you. There's Connor from Atlanta. Let's go next to Brett from Indianapolis. Brett, you are on the air.
Good to hear from you again.
Pleasure.
Yeah, so I am going to be quick. So I wanted to ask you, do you think you know who? I refuse to say his name. He just makes me so mad. Do you think he will go down as the #1 worst president in history, or do you think at least the top 5 worst?
Well, the top 5 worst. Out of how many? If this country lasts another 5,000 years, we could have a lot of really bad presidents. I just think there's no way to answer those questions. What we can say is Donald Trump represented a huge inflection point in the debasement of the office of the presidency. He is the worst president in recent political history, but any kind of, long-term pronouncements, who knows? It's very hard to make those predictions and not particularly useful either.
Right. I mean, I feel like, a person like Hitler, he was certainly studied a lot, and there's certainly some changes that were made after, Germany because of what happened to Hitler. And I feel like he could have some repercussions as to, changes made because of his presidency.
We will see. We will see. There should be consequences both for Trump and, listen, one of the things we learned under Trump was the safeguards we thought we had in place in case like a really horrible person got elected. Many of those safeguards clearly aren't strong enough because Donald Trump so far has skated with no consequences, but we'll see. Hopefully there will be consequences, Brett.
Yeah. And do you feel that it is important that we give him media attention? Because I had a German friend, so I'll sum up the story. He said, "Why do you guys still give Trump attention?" And I said,
I've talked about this before. He is for now the most prominent Republican and still the leader of the Republican Party, which is one of only 2 major parties in the U.S. So to just ignore him for the sake of ignoring him doesn't really make sense, given that he does have, the vast majority of his 74 million voters still follow the guy and would follow him to another party or vote for him again. So he's relevant in American politics. And I know you can say, well, he's only relevant because people talk about him. He still has 74 million followers. That's the reality.
Yeah. So my German friend was like, well, why don't you guys just ignore him? And I said, how'd it work out for you guys when you ignored Hitler?
Yeah. Fair. I like that. I like where you're going with that, Brett.
Yeah. All right. Good talking to you again. See
Okay.
ya.
Thanks, Brett. Brett from Indianapolis, getting right to it. Fantastic. Let's go next to, how about Roman from Pittsburgh? Roman, you're on the air.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
I mostly wanted to talk about the New York election that's happening. I was very interested in the change in the voting policies that they're enacting. I think that it actually has a lot of potential nationally as well to cause some actual moderation in the candidates that kind of have a chance of getting elected.
Sorry, are you talking about the New York City mayoral race?
Yes.
Oh, and what change did they make? I've not been following it, or maybe I've forgotten.
They transferred to a standard transferable vote, or
single transferable vote. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Got it. Yeah, I'm a big advocate of that.
Yeah, I was just curious if you thought that would have an ability to affect like presidential elections in a positive way?
Yes, I do. And I've been talking about this for a long time. The combination of doing campaign finance reform and getting away from first past the post towards something like single transferable vote. I think it's impossible to overstate how much it would do. It would allow third parties to really have a shot. It would make, hopefully, a lot of Americans kind of rethink how we approach elections. I've been advocating for both of those things for a really long time. I think it would be great.
I kind of continuing off of that. Do you think that that would kind of hide, like, so part of what I think is currently wrong with the elections is that primaries sort of allow for the most extreme candidate to push through a lot of their ideology to because most people who vote in primaries are either like highly engaged in the situation or have more extreme beliefs.
Yeah.
And I think that allowed for Donald Trump to sort of get more heinous ideas out there to get support from the people who are more engaged in the primaries.
That may be more true on the Republican side. I mean, look, if you looked at the Democratic primary of 2020, the guy who had more support than we thought was Biden, who was not the most extreme candidate by any means. In fact, to a fault, he's completely uncontroversial and not extreme in any way. So I don't know that that's necessarily true at the national level, but it's certainly plausible that in certain, maybe within the Republican Party or in certain parts of the country, it might be true.
Do you think that might be a result of the ways that the Democrats changed their primary system?
Well, tell me how you imagine that would be the case.
Well, in 2016, there was a very close race between Clinton and Bernie, and there had been some changes that people kind of were insinuating kind of flattened some of that support so that it would allow the most popular candidate to kind of take charge over time.
Yeah, well, so I don't know exactly what you're referring to, but the superdelegates voting on the first round at the convention was eliminated in 2020.
Right.
So yeah, I'm just not sure about that, but all important questions.
All right, I appreciate hearing from you, and you actually have some support from Pennsylvania and Pittsburgh. Most of that's super red and super problematic, but you have some blue dots around there.
All right, thank you so much, Roman. Appreciate the call. Let's see who else we want to speak to. Why don't we go to? Oh, I don't know. Maybe we go to Trey from Nashville. Trey, you're on the air.
Hey, I wanted to ask you, and I'm not trying to drag you into this really ugly fight that we see going on the left right now, but I'm just not quite understanding this whole dispute over the Syria chemical weapons attack that's going on with like the Young Turks and Aaron Mate and all them.
I have no idea. I'm the wrong guy to ask. I have absolutely no idea.
I think that the general thing is they're fighting over whether the 2018 chemical attacks like that allegedly Assad did against the people in Syria, whether it actually happened. Do you remember anything about that that attack and the reporting that went to it? I know that Trump responded by doing airstrikes on Syria.
Yeah, my belief is that it happened, but I am the last person to weigh in. I did a segment earlier this week about the drama that's happening on the left, and I did talk about the TYT Jimmy Dore stuff a little bit, but I couldn't tell you. I don't know. I have no idea. Who is it that the Young Turks is fighting with?
This guy Aaron Mate. He's a reporter. He did a lot of reporting in Syria.
Okay. Yeah, I have no idea what's going on with them. I'm sorry. I'm just not keeping up with it.
Okay, cool. One really different side question really quick. I just had a theory that I want to get your take on. I'm going to go ahead and say that in 2024, the GOP, they're going to want to try to take some kind of identity politics appeal and on their ticket they'll have either a person of color or a woman on the ticket, so they can continue to appeal to the change in demographics. Do you think that's plausible?
Yes, very much so. Yeah, the right loves to attack identity politics and then play it. And so yeah, that I would not be at all surprised if that happened.
Yeah, I'm just gonna say, so this is my way too early prediction. So if it happens in 2024, we'll see. But my guess is Tim Scott is going to be the VP nominee in 2024.
Okay, all right. Let's check in a few years, Trey, and see if you're right. I think that could be.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, man. You have a great day.
All right, you too. Trey from Nashville. Great to hear from you. Let's take a quick break. If you are holding to talk to me, don't go anywhere because we're going right back to the phones after this. All right, let's hear from a few more people via Discord. You can find our Discord at davidpakman.com/Discord. Let's start off with Alfie from London. You're on the air.
Oh, hey, David. I just had a quick question. I'm not sure if this is something you've really talked about before. Mainly just sort of what your opinion is on like euthanasia and the sort of right to death in like medical circumstances. I tend to be
pro right to decide you don't want to live anymore. And I do think that, because there can always be bad actors in any system, no matter what safeguards we have. I think we do want to put in place a system that would make it, if not impossible, really difficult for either bad actor physicians or bad actor family members or whatever to get involved in ways that could be really bad. But I've generally been supportive of euthanasia laws.
Okay. Yeah. It's weird. Whenever I ask someone about this, they tend to have some sort of variation on that. They seem like vaguely supportive. But it just seems weird that in like the UK and a lot of places in America, it's like entirely illegal.
Yeah.
So I wonder if you think that will go anywhere anytime soon.
It doesn't feel, at least at the federal level, like this is a big issue, but it doesn't necessarily need to be a big issue at the federal level because many of these decisions in the U.S. are made at the state level. So I think it will really depend on state level activists if they want to do more to try to move forward in certain states on it. But it's not feeling right now in taking the pulse of the country that it's a massive issue. The people that care about it a lot. I don't mean that there aren't people who are very passionate about it, but it doesn't feel like it's the biggest issue or anywhere close to it right now.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, fair enough. Yeah, that was it. Thanks very much for taking my call.
All right, thanks very much. That's Alfie from London, getting right to it, which I love. Why don't we try next? I don't know. How about Lilith from Arizona? Lilith from Arizona, you're on the air.
Hi.
Hello.
So I was really questioning, because you bring up quite often about mass deprogramming.
Mm-hmm.
I was questioning. Sorry, I'm just so nervous. Never done this before.
You're doing great. But it does sound like you're half the time covering your phone with something. So make sure everything's uncovered. We want to hear you.
Gotcha. All right. Well, you're saying that we need like some sort of mass deprogramming.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And I'm trying to figure out how would we go about that?
I don't know.
Because there's all of this anti-intellectualism, right? I think we really need an intellectual revolution per se.
Okay, and what would that look like? Who would lead it?
Who would lead it? That's a damn good question.
Did you have any ideas at all of who would lead it, or?
I think it would have to be our youth, probably.
Okay. So youth would do what in order to help mass deprogram?
That's what I was calling in question, because I don't have the answers.
Yeah, no, I don't either. I mean, you have the kernel of a great idea. And I think the youth are the future in a literal sense and a proverbial sense. So I think young people should be involved in it. But I just don't have the answer. And we talked recently with Andy Norman a little bit about mass deprogramming, and it is a tough thing. It is I don't have any answers, and I don't know that we will anytime soon.
And something else I was thinking of is maybe like, a revolution of empathy. I think that's something that would be needed, for people to understand each other and like really try and like approach each other in like a empathetic way instead of like, going like head to head so much.
Well, there's a partisan lack of empathy. In other words, there is less empathy on the right, in the brains of people on the right. We know that. And that alone. But how do you convince people to care about others, right? It's a really tough thing. Right. It has a lot to do with upbringing and predisposition and so many things. These are big, complicated issues.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. It's too much, honestly.
Yep.
I wonder.
All right. Well, thank you for the call. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, you're doing great. Thank you. Great call. Great first call to a program. I'm sure the next one will be even better. All right. Why don't we speak to a couple of other people, right? I mean, we're here. We sort of might as well. Why don't we go to Garen from Dallas?
Hey, David, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Hey, so so I'm a physician here in Dallas, and I've just been listening to your show probably for the past year, and I've really appreciated your kind of rhetoric and take on the just the whole coronavirus pandemic in general. I guess my thoughts and my questions to you is, as someone, your family kind of comes to you advice as a physician, and things like that. And one of the things that's been really kind of tough for me going forward as a physician is, I have this very pro-vaccine, masking standpoint, and people want to reach out to you and say, well, what about these other problems that I have? It's the kind of, I don't know if other physicians have this kind of dilemma, but it's trying to, how do you trust some information that I tell you, but not other information that I tell you? And it's kind of broken the glass box. And it's kind of broken the glass box for me on a lot of people, and especially friends and family. I'm just curious if you've had that kind of interactions, or you're kind of those revelations of certain people. It's like, how can you not understand this pretty good data that we have? It's I don't know if you've had that kind of experience.
I have.
With that kind of friends and family. Yeah.
Now let me ask you this: what's your specialty?
So I'm orthopedic surgeon. So
okay, so it's not directly related to immunology or epidemiology, sure. Right? So in other words, people come to you and they say, "Sir, my knee's bothering me." And then you give them, you whatever, you talk about it, and then they implicitly trust you. But then when you say, hey, I'm a doctor, I know how to read a medical study, get the vaccine, it's really effective, all of a sudden then they don't believe you. They're skeptical of your thought.
That's all the people become pretty experts in the face of certain data, but then, obviously they, unequivocally trust my, input on their hip arthritis or, whatever you want to call it. So,
sure.
Yeah, it's just, I don't know if other physicians or other people have experienced that,
They have. I know an emergency, a pediatric emergency doctor who has some anti-vax people floating around in his family. And he's talked about how they come to me with questions about their babies. And then all of a sudden I'm saying we all need to get the vaccine. And it just doesn't convince them. They don't care.
Yep.
Yeah. Hey, listen, while I have you on the phone, brief orthopedic consult. So, I'm in my mid 30s now, and I'm getting a little bit of sort of crunching, crackling in my knees. And when you Google this, it's everything from you need a new leg to don't worry about it, right? Like, how should I be thinking about that?
Yeah. So, you're in your kind of mid 30s, I think, right? So, everyone kind of gets arthritis as we age, but there's a ton of things that can cause knee pain, meniscal problems. I think I've heard you say you're kind of an avid runner and things like that. So people.
Oh no, we're losing you right at the key moment of the diagnosis.
Oh yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm thinking you were saying running can aggravate this.
Yeah, so it kind of depends on your symptoms. The crunching, popping things you're kind of describing can sound like it could be meniscal related, or it could be, hopefully not early arthritis for you, but probably not.
I actually have this birth defect called discoid meniscus in one knee. And
then that would probably, that would probably be related to some of the things you're referring to. Yeah.
is discoid meniscus typically bilateral, or it can be just on one side?
You can definitely get it bilaterally, but there are cases, unilaterally it can be as well. So, I mean, is that the knee that's popping on you?
It's not. That's the interesting thing.
It's not. Well, some people, when their kids have discoid meniscus, but they never really bothers them. The main symptom they'll get is catching symptoms, locking, popping, that kind of thing.
Right.
So some people have it and just never really have pain. So if it's not bothering you, then there's really nothing much to do about it.
So like is when you start to think about it, I'm like, is my knee unstable? Am I having a bigger issue here? But it might just be that I'm thinking about it,
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow. So for the most part, I can keep the leg for now.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we're going to amputate it just yet on you, but let me know how it's going, and we can take it off if we need to.
We'll take it from there. Okay. All right. Good. Okay, Dr. Guerin, thank you so much.
Thanks, David.
All right. Great call. Wow. And by the way, if there's a podiatrist in the audience, I also have other questions. So if you could call in, I would really appreciate a consult on that as well. Let's go next to Alvaro from Tulsa, Oklahoma. You're on the air. Alvaro. Ooh, just barely. Sounds like you're underwater. Ooh, it's no better, yeah. All right, gonna let him. I mean, I just can't do that today. It's too busy of a day to start with that. All right, why don't we try Brenda from Minnesota? Brenda, we've spoken before, right?
Yeah. Yes, we have.
What's going on?
I have been outed in chat as a boomer, by the way.
Oh, very good. Thank you.
So I wanted to ask you about, there was an incident that occurred a couple of days ago where a BBC journalist was chased and hounded by anti-maskers and anti-vaxxers.
Yes, I saw that.
This is really concerning to me because I kind of feel like these conspiracy theories can lead, acceptance of a conspiracy, this can snowball really fast, is my concern. I think people this extreme are not a problem now, but I think in the future it could snowball really fast because there is so much distrust of official news sources these days. And then people they just believe whatever they read.
Brenda, I would go further. I think it's a problem now. And the more I talk to conspiracy experts, the more they say it doesn't matter if their most prominent wacky belief isn't that dangerous. It never is an isolated belief. There's always more behind it. There's either racism or anti-Semitism or other conspiracies. I think we can't take the approach of, these people could be a problem down the line if they transfer their wacky beliefs to other areas. I think we have to see them as a problem now.
Well, so then what is the solution? And I'm not familiar. Maybe I missed an episode or something where you went through proposed solutions. But
No. There's been no episode on the solutions. I don't have them, unfortunately.
We can't just magic facts into people's brains.
No, we're still searching for a solution. We have a problem. We're searching for a solution. I hope we can find it.
That would be an interesting show that I would like to see.
Yeah. Well, I'm working on it. I will broadcast it as soon as I discover it.
Okay.
All right.
I think
Brenda, thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Pleasure. Great to speak to Brenda again. That is all the time we have for today. If you didn't make it into today's show, fear not. There will be another opportunity. I received a ton of questions this week since our coverage Monday about Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu being out and Naftali Bennett being in as Prime Minister. And the gist of the question is, will this actually make a difference in terms of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict? And the answer is we just don't know yet. There are folks who are claiming that there is absolutely no difference between Naftali Bennett and Benjamin Netanyahu on their willingness to make change to the status quo when it comes to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And I think that there's some truth. There's truth to the reality that Naftali Bennett is still a right-winger. There's no question about that, but not from the party Likud, and a different approach. And what you have to understand is that a lot of what progress can be made comes down to the coalition. the coalition, which includes members of multiple parties, agrees on some things, and that's typically where the vast majority of the focus is. And on areas where they disagree, nothing tends to happen. But the other side to this is that no matter who you put in power in Israel, if there is not some kind of coherent change, coherent and productive change to Palestinian leadership, nothing will happen. There's just no chance whatsoever. I've been saying for years, a prerequisite for change would be Benjamin Netanyahu not being prime minister. We've achieved that. Okay, we've got someone who's slightly less right wing now and might be willing to make some changes and negotiate in some areas. But on the other hand, you still have Gaza controlled by Hamas. You have a Palestinian Authority in the West Bank that, while certainly more willing to work with Israel, and there is a worker program, and there's much more happening than with Gaza, is at odds in many ways with Hamas, and completely unwilling to cede power to maybe allow the Palestinian Authority to negotiate on everyone's behalf. I mean, it's like, I sound crazy even talking about this stuff because there's zero chance that this is going to happen. So I don't know the answer. And as I mentioned earlier in the week, the vast majority of the Israeli population is concerned with and prioritizing domestic issues like economics and wages and infrastructure, much like we do in the United States. And so particularly as outsiders, when we look at, a place like Ukraine, and for us, one of the big issues we associate with Ukraine is the conflict with Russia and Putin versus Ukraine and all of this stuff. For the vast majority of Ukrainians, I actually have a Ukrainian friend who was just there. And I said, how much do people talk about Putin? And he says, it's casual conversation, but the vast majority of it is there's roads that are a disaster in Ukraine. There's roads that are so potholed that it took 4 hours to go what on a normal road would take half an hour in order to get to the village that he was originally from. That's what people there care about. And this is one of the great distortions. People talk about the distortion of following foreign policy, you take on the biases of whatever the media in your country has. And much of the American left likes to say almost all American media is biased pro-Israel. The real bias is that we end up thinking that the big issues domestically are the Israeli-Palestinian conflict when they are not. And similarly, based on what we hear about Ukraine, we might think everybody's constantly talking about the situation with Putin. Another example, I've spoken to Korean friends who they live in the United States, but have family in South Korea. And for example, at a moment when there was a big flare up with missile launches from Kim Jong-un, I said, oh, how's your family thinking about or dealing with the rocket launches? And he said, it really, if you're right there and have reason to think that you may be in danger, it's something that might be on your radar, so to speak. But for his family, it wasn't really an issue. It was jobs, it was healthcare, it was globalization and so many other things. And so the real cognitive distortion that happens as Americans following the politics of other countries is we tend to focus only on the things that are externally facing and maybe relate to us in some way, which is logical because, hey, we're us. And that's in some sense what we care about. But the internal situation is often much different. So needless to say, I think that there is 5 to 7% greater possibility that we start to see some serious negotiations when it comes to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. But if and until there's a leadership change in Gaza, I just don't see how anything is going to change. If you have a different view, let me know. Hey, David, what would happen if you abolished the minimum wage? Okay, so there's been a lot of talk about a $15 minimum wage lately. And we learned last week that Chipotle, in order to account for paying $15 an hour, is raising prices 4%, which is a really, really modest increase. It's like 26 cents on your average chicken burrito, even though everybody will earn $15 an hour. And there are some sort of libertarian right-wing types who say, listen, the minimum wage is an artificial price floor, and it is simply bad. It's a price control. It's bad for the economy. It keeps people out of the workforce. If you eliminated the minimum wage, sure, wages might come down a little bit, but way more people would end up becoming employed, and that would be good for the economy because then they would pay taxes and blah, 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 blah. Okay. First of all, if you saw a decrease to the minimum wage that's significant and it led to more employment, a lot of those people, because the wage would be so low, would not or would barely pay any federal taxes. So in reality, the tax thing may even be wrong, number one. Number two, we have a counterexample to this, okay? The value of the minimum wage. Remember, if you have a $7 minimum wage and you have inflation, the value of that minimum wage actually goes down. If you're the employer and there is inflation, meaning your product or service sells for more, but you pay the same nominal minimum wage, you are actually seeing a decrease to the minimum wage in real terms. We had a situation in the 1980s where the minimum wage, the actual value of the minimum wage went down about a third because of inflation. And we actually saw teen employment drop slightly. This is the big claim from the right. All of these teenagers and entry-level workers and what we call less skilled workers, they would have way more employment if the minimum wage were to go down. Well, the minimum wage did go down in real terms during the 1980s, and significantly so, just under a third, 32%, I believe the number is. And you did not see teen employment explode because it all of a sudden became really cheap to hire people. It got cheaper for businesses to hire because of that stagnant minimum wage, and they didn't. And as I've said so many times before, when it comes to taxation and hiring and the minimum wage, if a business is understaffed relative to the demand for their product or service, then it would make sense to go and add a new worker. And if you can get that worker for less, well, okay, even better for the business, I guess. But it's not profitable to just add workers because it's cheaper to add them. It doesn't make sense. Think about it, with the David Pakman show. If we actually have an unmet need, either because we have so much demand for advertising that I need more salespeople, or we have so much demand for memberships that I need to bring on a full-time web developer to keep up with the website traffic, or whatever the case may be. Just because it becomes cheaper to hire someone doesn't mean I'm actually going to go and hire someone unless I'm servicing demand. Now, what would actually increase demand? And this is where the right just kind of seems to not get it or pretend not to get it. What would increase demand for memberships? It would be people having more money. And one way to put more money in the pockets of people who might only borderline be able to afford a membership right now would be a minimum wage increase. Now, I think there are some fair assessments about the minimum wage that come from the right. One is most people don't make minimum wage. And because wages tend to be sticky, wages don't tend to come down. If you got rid of the minimum wage, it's unlikely that most people's wages would come down. If you're in a job where you make the equivalent of $25 an hour, it might be $25 an hour, or it might just be a $50,000 a year salary, right? If the minimum wage went down or even was eliminated, it's not hugely likely, at least right away, that you would end up earning less money. But there is a particularly vulnerable class of workers, particularly when we're talking about immigrants, talking about people in disadvantaged neighborhoods that already often have the sort of structural disadvantages of terrible public transit and so on and so forth. Those are the first folks who are going to be taken advantage of, and there's going to be this downward pressure. And the whole point of the minimum wage is not to ensure everybody makes 50 grand a year. That would require a $25 minimum wage at every job in many states that are low cost of living. It's just not an equilibrium wage. And I know there's many people who say the minimum wage should be $25 an hour. In rural Alabama, a $25 an hour minimum wage is out of equilibrium with business profitability and cost of living. In some big cities, that probably is the right minimum wage. But the point here is you are going to see the most disadvantaged and those with the least market power to advocate for themselves taken advantage of. Now, the right will then come back in and say, well, they can then organize and they can all agree we're not going to work for less than X, and they can push prices up and demand to be paid more. That's what unions do now. And those same right wingers are against unions and they're against collective bargaining and on and on and on. So you really have to step back from the talking points on this. If you eliminate the minimum wage, is it likely that a lot of people would start working for 50 cents an hour? No, that's not likely. But the federal minimum wage is already pathetic. The other thing, by the way, that's important to remember is reducing the minimum wage will shift the burden of paying people away from businesses and towards the government. If you reduce the minimum wage, you're also basically setting up a bigger government handout and subsidy, because the benefits and welfare programs that individuals will start to qualify for, if you scrap the minimum wage and you see somewhat of a reduction, $7.25, maybe some people start working for $6 or $5 an hour or $4.50 or whatever. The fact that more people will work, which doesn't appear to be true, but even if it were true, more people will work if you reduce the minimum wage. Whatever they pay in to the government, you will lose because they will qualify for government welfare programs that cost the government money that come out of taxes anyway. So the point of the minimum wage is let's agree and establish some minimum that makes sense based on cost of living, based on equilibrium wages, based on what we consider to be a reasonable standard to set. We're not talking about a $50 an hour, $100 an hour minimum wage, and it should be in balance with the broader economy and prevent the most vulnerable from being taken advantage of. That's really the point. And the hypotheses about, well, if more money is good, pay people $100, or if you get rid of the minimum wage, people will be working for 10 cents an hour. You're focusing on the extremes, and you're really sort of missing the big picture. David, if COVID really was created in a lab, what would be the repercussions? Well, I assume that you mean created in a lab by China. Obviously, if the virus was created in a lab by, Eritrea, the consequences would be very different than China. The focus has been on China. I think with the lab leak stuff, there's a few different parameters and ways that could shake out. Number one, if it was literally created in a lab as a bioweapon and deliberately released, first of all, it's really stupid because of how many people died in China. And it also, in a sense, is a failed bioweapon because the death rate is comparatively low. If you really wanted to do damage and do bioterror, you would probably develop something that had more than, like the 0.7% death rate that COVID has. But that's sort of like an aside. It would have been a really stupid thing anyway, because if those who believe it was done as a bioweapon believe it was done to attack the U.S., it mostly killed people outside the United States. It didn't even really cripple economies. I mean, some countries handled it better than others, but the economic recovery is going relatively well. So if that's the case, it was really dumb and poorly executed. But it would have significant foreign policy impacts if we learned that this was a bioweapon deliberately released by China. I'm not saying war, but it would be certainly economic war. I believe that that's the least likely scenario when you look at lab leak conspiracies. The next scenario would be that it was being studied in a lab and it accidentally was released. Someone scratched themselves and then it went out into the public. If that's the case, I think there are going to be economic sanctions. I think it's going to be taken very seriously. I think there will be consequences, but it's not going to be of the scale that those who are clamoring for it was a bioweapon conspiracy are sort of pointing to. And then, if it was the most likely scenario to me still is it emerged naturally in China. It may have been studied in a lab, but the spread did not originate at that lab. And China pretty clearly covered it up early. We covered the story, I believe it was in December of 2019, of one of the doctors who was saying, hey, this is going on. And police came to his house and said, don't talk about this anymore. and China understated the number of cases and China understated the number of deaths. I don't know what the consequences should be in that case, but you're then talking about a diplomatic issue that is far different than the other extreme, which is this was a created bioweapon deliberately released. As you can tell, I tend to think that the reality comes in sort of those latter examples. As I've always said before, it should all be looked into. There is no investigation or analysis that should not be done. I'm for all of the investigations, but I think we should be careful not to say that something is likely until we really know for sure. And right now, we can't say any of these lab leaks are likely. If you have a different view, let me know. We have a great bonus show for you today. Sign up at joinpacman.com.